So do you also talk with actual drivers about how to change things?
We do, and this year we took the game down quite early to Mercedes to go and visit their esports drivers. Lando's driven a lap for us recently in Las Vegas, so again we get great feedback there. We've had Max and Charles drive the game.
Mr. Lee, we are absolutely thrilled to have you as our guest today in the show. I think you are involved with the game like 12 years, if my understanding is correctly.
I think I'm just looking at the year. It's 23, isn't it? So if you count when I first joined the project, it's 15 years, yeah, with our first release being 2010.
So let's dive right in. When did the development of the F1 game start, and how long did it take to develop?
So essentially, we have two teams that work on F1 these days. So it's sort of one large team that's on the next release, and then a smaller team that go a year ahead and work on the following release. So obviously, as soon as 21 was finished, the team that did 23 were already starting to spin up 23. So we'd already got a team working on this sort of around mid-21 it would have started.
So in what specific way do the regulations in Formula 1 influence the gameplay mechanics, features and overall experience of the game?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we used to make that obviously a realistic representation of the sport. So things that really work well in a game as well. So you have things like, yellow flags, red flags. Red flags are obviously new to the game this year. And obviously things like the safety car, those are obviously major parts of Formula 1 and a major part of the rules. We've seen the impact they have on races in recent years. And those are things that we mirror in the game. And they have that same sort of impact. And in a game, they even feel more impactful because they impact you as well. So it could be, obviously, you get a red flag. Everybody gets to put fresh tyres on, replace broken components. It really mixes up the race structure completely. And then of course the structure of the race weekend with sprint races and things like that as well. Those are major changes in the sport that we've either got where they're up to date right now, or we'll be looking to make changes in the future, as obviously the sport's been trialing different sort of race weekend structures with sprint, and then changing the tire strategies as well. The tire allocations have changed again this year. So always changes in the sport, but always things that we want to represent accurately in the game as soon as we can do so.
Let's talk about red flags. They're brand new to the game. We know how red flags work, but could you tell how the function actually works in this game? Like, how do you trigger them? Is it like compared to a real life Formula 1, or is it different, or?
One thing that we can't do is see what's exactly going on. So we have to work based on a system that can judge the severity of an incident, the severity of, say, debris on the track, and also on certain tracks, whether the circuit is completely blocked, whether it would be considered dangerous. So we work based on a points-based system. And obviously with systems such as virtual safety car and safety car, again, those are based on the severity of an incident. So as in real life, if there's a car that's on the circuit, for example, but in a safe area, then they usually go to a VSC. If the car's in a slightly more dangerous area where they need marshal intervention, it goes to a full safety car. And then in severe incidents, it goes to a red flag. And we judge again based on the severity of the incident as to whether a red flag's triggered or not. Again, so that's also based on where the cars are, but also debris on the circuit as well. If there's significant debris, that can again push over that threshold and trigger a red flag.
So could you provide us more details about the modification that are made to the handling model in comparison to the previous game? Like, how does this changes affect the gameplay and realism?
It's always an ongoing project, the physics side of the game. And we set out at the start of this project with some core changes that we wanted to make. And they came really based on feedback we've had from the community over the last few years, also off the back of the esports drivers, the Formula 1 drivers who've played the game, and the F1 test drivers. And that was that traction in our game was trickier than in real life. And that a Formula 1 car, by the time you reach in sort of the top end of second gear, you can mash the throttle and you've got full confidence. Mm-hmm. In F1 22, the concern was that, you were maybe in third, fourth gear before you had confidence to get on the throttle. And that feedback we had from Anthony Davidson was that with traction control enabled in F1 22, that was more similar to the kind of traction you have in a Formula 1 car. So we worked really heavily on, firstly, the interaction between the longitudinal and lateral slip of the tyre, so that the behavior you have when you do brake traction is more realistic and more controllable. We also worked on the inertia of the wheel and tyre as well, because that has a big bearing on how that behaves. So it's not just the actual contact patch and the traction, it's the weight of that component spinning and slowing as well. And we also did similar on the body as well, so the body of the car, so how it rotates when it's starting to lose traction. and also in the turn. And then we did a significant amount of work on the way that the throttle works as well. So previously, Formula One cars have a huge amount of torque these days, being turbocharged. Turbo engines produce a lot of torque, and we've now included a similar system to the real Formula One cars in that we map the torque differently based on gear, so that again it's more controllable, it's more progressive, and players can really feel what that throttle's doing. So if you're playing on a wheel or a set of pedals, you can really feel what the front of the car's doing. But if you're on a controller, the motors and the haptic feedback really gives you a really good heads up of when that traction's about to go. So I was doing a wet race at Spa at the end of last week, and you could really feel that edge just as the tyre was starting to break. And I think it's that connection between not only the changes we made to the physics, but also how it connects more effectively to the feedback that the player gets. Makes for a much more realistic, much more engrossing, but actually a more controllable and accessible handling model.
So do you also talk with actual drivers about how to change things?
We do, and this year we took the game down quite early to Mercedes to go and visit their esports drivers. So we can obviously have access to the esports drivers, but not the ones who compete in the esports tournament at the moment, because that would give them early access. So we went down, we took advantage of the fantastic facility they've got. We had Anthony Davidson, who's their sim test driver, who's worked with us for a number of years, play the title. And then obviously since then, you'll have seen Lando's driven a lap for us recently in Las Vegas. So again, we get great feedback there. We've had Max and Charles drive the game. So it's just, we're working on getting them in as early as possible, but we have so many great contacts now across the industry that we get really good feedback in those areas.
She's done it, as many predicted she would. A star is born. Callie Mayer becomes the first woman ever to win the F2 championship.
So of course the Thrill single player story mode Breaking Point is back. So what are the changes compared to the last one?
So, I mean, there's a number of things that we wanted to achieve for the second story in Breaking Point. I mean, obviously, story-wise, we wanted to do something different. We wanted to take inspiration from what was going on in the world of Formula One, of course, what you see in Drive to Survive, what the drivers are doing, the sort of the personalities that you see come from the drivers. We also wanted to do something new and get ahead of where the sport's going. So obviously now the sport's got the Academy as the women's only series, which is going to bring forward hopefully the first driver in Formula One for a significant amount of time. And that was part of the story thinking as well. We wanted to do something like that. We wanted to bring, a strong female character into the world of Formula One through the F2 series with Callie Mayer. So that was the thinking behind the story. We also wanted to continue the journey of our existing characters who people have grown to know and love when it comes to the likes of Devon. It's a little bit more challenging, but again, continue their journey. But we also said that we wanted to give the players more agency over their experience. So the story is always going to be the story that we've written, but the things that go on around it now in the secondary narrative can be impacted by the player. So they're impacted by your performance on the track and also the way that you answer interviews to the press. But also there's periods now in the story where you'll take over the responsibilities of the team boss and you'll have to answer questions that relate to what the drivers are doing. And again, that can have an impact on the secondary narrative. So the primary now and secondary objectives you have on track will be impacted by the questions you give, the questions you answer, and the way that you actually race as well. So there's a secondary narrative to that. So it could be you're asked as the team boss, there's a bit of a rivalry going on here. How's your driver going to do this weekend? As the team boss, you might say, well, I think my driver's going to perform really well. And then your secondary objective could be to finish in a certain position to achieve, what the boss has put as confidence in you.
So we got another brand new feature called F1 World. Could you explain us in more detail how it looks and works? Like what kind of content or activities does it offer to the player?
F1 World at its core is an entirely new game mode where the player has a new car, which has a tech level. And that tech level you upgrade to increase the performance of the car to be able to race in events of varying tech levels. That's at its most basic. What it actually consists of is all of the game modes outside of driver, career, my team, and story. And they're all now part of the new F1 World game mode. So when you compete in any of those events, you will earn rewards and unlock currencies that you can spend to upgrade your car, to upgrade your team. So, you'll have a principal, R&D guy, the different departments that you work with there. You'll be able to apply new characters to them to improve the performance of your team. And all of this is essentially you can race in any of these modes. You can race multiplayer, you can race single player, you can do the events that we set up, and they're created to be daily, weekly, or seasonal as well. So the idea is that over the course of the 8-week period, there's always something fresh, always something new for the player to be doing. So it may be you get home from work at the end of the day, you've got 20 minutes and you think, I'll play a bit of F1. You can jump in and you could do some quick races, you could do some time trial, and all of these things are continually rewarding you. So you're upgrading your car, you're building up your tech level, and you're able to enter other races as well. And we've also included in there, obviously, multiplayer as part of this area as well. So it's single player and multiplayer gameplay. But we've also added in the leagues as well. Leagues will cover that. But divisional multiplayer, which is a new feature as well, which is something that we thought was very cool for players who want to sort of test themselves against players of similar skill level. All of that's now part of F1 World.
Are these challenges a lot of crossover compared to the Grand Prix weekends?
That's very much the plan. So what we'll be able to do is create weekly challenges that run at the same period of time as the race weekends. So we can tie them to what's going on in the real world. It's keeping that connection to what's going on in the sport. In a similar vein that, you see the teams now bringing unique liveries and suits and helmets to Grand Prix. We want to be able to use F1 World to create challenges and events that tie to those as well, to potentially reward players with those sorts of items.
So we also got a lot of people, of course, playing this game on the couch, laying back. What are the adjustments made to improve the game for controller players?
As I spoke about the base handling is now significantly more controllable for players in that it's more realistic, but it's also more accessible because of that. It's easier to relate to. But we really wanted to continue to develop the level of control that players on a pad has. So obviously a wheel player has the absolute fidelity to make really fine adjustments, to be constantly adjusting the car, to be, fighting those small camber changes in the track, to be catching the slides. All of those things feel very natural if you're used to driving a car. And on a controller, obviously, you have very limited movement with your thumb. You have very limited controls with your fingers for the throttle and brake. And we wanted to do something about that, to give the controller player the same level of fidelity and confidence that you have on a wheel. And that's where Precision Drive comes in. So what Precision Drive does is it ensures that when the player makes their input on the controller, it gives them the level of control and fidelity that they would have if they were making that on a wheel. So it could be you're going through a very fast series of corners, and the level of input that you have will allow you to be smooth and progressive. But then you might come to a series of very short, very quick, say in a chicane at, say, Monza, for example, first corner. You can make a very fast and aggressive input because the car's, at a relatively low speed. And the system will allow the player to make that input. So they're not disadvantaged to a wheel player who can do exactly what they want. And then also, if the car was to, for example, you catch a curb and you get a bit of a slide on, you can make those really fine adjustments on the controller without unsettling the car. So it allows for much more confidence in the turn. It allows for much more direct inputs when trying to hit the apex, and it allows for also a more confident approach when you're wheel to wheel with another car. The change that you'll make won't have the effect that's sort of unexpected. It gives you a much more attached feeling to the car.
Of course, we need to close it off with the multiplayer modes. In our Discord channel, there's a group that are pretty dedicated to the F1 multiplayer modes. Have there been any modifications made to the multiplayer modes?
There's two significant changes in multiplayer. First, we previously had leagues in the game, and we've obviously engaged with our community who run leagues significantly. And we felt that running the leagues through the game wasn't something they were doing. They were running the games via their Discord servers and they were setting them up themselves. So we've actually moved the league functionality onto our RaceNet platform. And that allows for a much broader range of options. And that makes it much easier for leagues to run the leagues the way they choose to do so. It gives them the power and the control that we weren't able to offer through the league functionality in game. So we think that's something that's going to be really, really popular with leagues. And then we also added the ranked divisional play. So the concept behind ranked divisional play is that, I'm a reasonable player at F1, but I'm not the greatest in the world. I can join the division and I will get placed in, let's say at the start, bronze 3. And at the end of the first week, I've performed well. I get promoted into bronze 2. I've now got a bit of progression going on there. I'm racing with people of a similar level to me, and we're actually competing. And we're competing for promotion and demotion on a weekly basis on a series of tracks that we define. So that's where there's a little bit of competition, but there's also, for someone like myself, I know that I'm competing against people of a similar skill level, finding good races and getting those weekly promotions, demotions if I'm performing well. And of course, for the absolute top players, if they make it to elite is no longer part of the divisional structure. It becomes a large leaderboard. So actually then at that point, you're competing with the best in the world. to show your skill. So we think that's a really, really cool addition to the multiplayer experience.
Well, that's good to hear that you are matchmaking with the same level. Like, I'm always struggling in the multiplayer game, so there's hope for me as well. So Lee, we appreciate it taking the time to speak with us, and good luck to you and the team this week with the release of the brand new F1 game.
Thank you. Yeah, absolute pleasure as always.
Cheers.